Good morning, everyone. Welcome to NeoSystems Coffee Break series on NeoFlow. It's NeoSystems' standardized pre-built best practice workflow solution that builds on NeoSystems' expertise in system integration through the Integrify workflow tool. So from back in mid-July all the way through to mid-September, we're going to be discussing each of the 9 workflow applications that the NeoSystems BPI team has developed. In case you can't attend any of the other sessions, make sure you look out for those recordings. We have covered topics like payables, billing, vendor maintenance, and vendor ratings already. Today, we're going to cover employee management, and then we'll move on next week and beyond into journal entry approval, financial statement approval, employee workforce, and finally wrap this all up with travel authorization. My name is Marty Herbert. I am the practice lead for the BPI team, and today we're joined by Taylor Robinson. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
So we are about halfway through with our coffee break series, and I notice people kind of come and go, and I can't necessarily pay attention to all of the names of everybody that hops on these. So we are going to take a quick poll question just to kind of get everybody warmed up a little bit. We are going to take a quick poll question this morning. And that question is this your first coffee talk on business process improvement? And specifically on NeoFlow. Again, we've been talking about these since mid-July. So, I know for some of you, yeah, it could be your first time, and maybe we've got some excitement around around employees in particular, or maybe not. Maybe we haven't been here, but you've taken a look at some of the recordings, that kind of thing. So we'll take a quick look. Perfect. All right. So yeah, it looks like I've seen some others, and I need to know more about employee management. Great, glad to have you back. Watching recordings is also really good. Those are available through our website, and if you don't have access, just post into the QA. QA is going to be the best place to interact with us as we go through discussing employee management and how that works in NeoFlow. So use the Q&A section to get your questions answered, get the link for the other for where to find the other recordings and things like that. So as everybody's kind of learning, and as our audience has been learning throughout each of these coffee talks, NeoFlow is really about standardizing processes. So each of the flows provides a really good baseline, provides best practice, all of those tasks, and really makes it an as-is, out-of-the-box, ready-to-roll solution for these different workflows. Or it serves as a really good baseline to configure it further. We've had some clients recently who've reached out to us that say, you know what, that baseline process looks awesome, has great bones to it, but we want to take that and kind of build upon that. So it also helps to get some of that development work done sooner, faster, to get moving forward. So these chats really are starting to get some attention, and we're being asked about a lot of different processes now. The best part is, if you did miss any, you can go back and get those from our website. Definitely recommend taking a look, especially if you have specific pains in some of the areas that I mentioned earlier. So we'll hop right into employee management. And Taylor, you probably know better than anyone how much things have really changed over the past year and a half. So I dropped you kind of right in the middle of employee management in Costpoint and this workflow. So really, what was your first thought when you had to approach this process?
Well, if you haven't spent much time in the employee module, it can be kind of confusing. So when you first get in there, it has the opening screen has just basic information like employee name. I think it has some employee IDs, government IDs, vendor IDs. But then a lot of the other information is stored in subtask link, and there's a lot of subtask links. And when you click on them, it creates a pop-up menu. So it'll be in front of the other information. So if you're trying to see what information there is about an employee, it's kind of time consuming because you have to click through so many buttons. And if you want to kind of go between different subtask menus or the home screen, it just kind of is confusing and just doesn't make the process very enjoyable in terms of trying to find the information you want, because some of the titles, like one of them is miscellaneous, at the moment, I couldn't tell you what is exactly under the miscellaneous subtask link. So in terms of if you're going in there to find information, it can be a little confusing. And then especially with Costpoint, a Costpoint administrator has to give you access to that. So it really restricts who can go in there, update that information. And so that can kind of slow down in terms of updating information, changing information, things of that nature.
So really, to kind of boil it down, sounds like, user experience, with trying to see everything all at once, trying to do whatever it is you need to do. It's kind of a little bit cumbersome on the user experience side, right?
Certainly, yes.
So knowing that, kind of going in there and, kind of exploring what is the employee module and, kind of what's there. What was your approach to people in relation to the NeoFlow and to this process? And what's it supposed to be like? What can you walk us through kind of what that process does?
The main things I was looking to do is, one, make it easier to view the information, easier to update the information, because one thing I noticed, or one thing I kind of felt, is when you have so many of those windows open, you can't remember which ones you updated. So you kind of just go by one, you go through each subtask menu, then you save, and that's very time consuming. So just make it easier to update the information, and then really open the process to all employees, if that, depending on the organization, because that can really streamline the whole process in terms of giving the power to the employees. They know when their address is changed or something like that. So really allowed them to kick off the process. So when you get into the process, there's a search box. Excuse me. There's a search box at the top, and so what you do is you go in there, you search for your name, and then all the information for that person will then pre-fill on the left side, and then you have a lot of information to get out of my head. So you have all the information on the left side, and then on the right side, you have a corresponding field. And so what they can do is they can see what information's in there, if there's any, and then they can go onto the other side and update that information, or they don't have to change anything. It could just be a way to just see what's in Costpoint for that employee. Excuse me.
So they really have a way of kind of doing side-by-side comparison, which, I mean, that doesn't really exist. And it sounds like, with the, especially with this first piece of the process, that it's about getting all of the relevant information into one place, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. It's really, and the way I did it is, I grouped them into 4 buttons. So you still have buttons to click, but it's much less, and you can still click all the buttons and have one form to view all the information.
That's cool. So when you start to view all the information, and kind of one of the first things that kind of strikes me when viewing all the employee information, and I'm sure that some of the people on the call are listening in and going, wait a second, there's definitely some areas that we don't want people to see. I mean, things like compensation plans, because if I can just go in and search up somebody and find find compensation, stuff like that, I mean, those are things that not everybody gets access to anyway. So that, I mean, that's also in the same thing with this process, right?
Yeah, I mean, as you said in the beginning, each organization is different. So if there's certain information somebody doesn't want their employees to see, or if you don't want employees to be the one to kick off the process, we can configure that, customize it in terms of who can see what on the page, depending on your position, role, and really just kind of customize that user experience to each organization.
So with each organization kind of having those pieces, again, we talk about NeoFlow being the baseline, and one of the things I know that I've experienced, in the different clients that I've engaged with, is really that the employee module is that other module. I mean, is the goal of this process kind of to help a little bit with that? How does it relate in, kind of making sure that employee module isn't lost?
Yeah, so I think the user experience kind of, especially if you don't go in there often, it it's not an enjoyable experience. So I feel it seems to drive people away from using it into external systems. And companies pay for, Costpoint's a great ERP system, but a lot of companies only really utilize just a couple of the modules, domains within the system. But the people module has a lot of capabilities. So kind of creating a process that makes getting the information into that module more enjoyable, we really think will drive usage and really give the organization more data, more insight into their workforce.
Well, and there are so many services organizations doing work with the government using Costpoint and all of that. I mean, service organizations are built on people, so you would think that that people module would really kind of call to them. So, when we talk about kind of the process and we get all the information in one place and that kind of thing, how does this NeoFlow in particular translate into efficiency, because in the end we want things to be better. Is it really about efficiency? Is it something else? And how does this process kind of translate the two to make that to make the process itself kind of happen beyond just side by side?
So if you if you think about what an organization would have done before the process, you would have an employee that might submit a form. That form may be submitted electronically or turned in paper, and then HR is in charge of getting that information. And then you may need an approval process depending on the organization. And so how do you go about getting that? Is that just an email approval? So taking all that and putting it into one process so it structures everything, so you know where everything is. And because we can add an approval into the process, it really creates a safeguard in terms of if an employee does change information that maybe they weren't supposed to, or maybe something they just didn't enter the information incorrectly, we can really, once they get that information, it goes to an approver. Right now it's set up to go to their supervisor, but we can structure that or configure that to go to an HR representative or somebody else in the organization. And so they'll review that information. And if there's anything they need to change, it goes right back to the employee or the individual that requested the process. And then if it gets approved, then there is one extra step where double check to make sure the information is all correct. Then it goes right in the Costpoint. So instead of, having to, it creates it when it sends to the Costpoint, you don't actually have to re-enter the information. Information gets entered right into Costpoint. So, it takes a lot of tasks from HR or whoever's in charge of updating that. You don't have to take the form or the information from the employee, make sure it's correct with them, get an approver from somebody through email or something like that. And then you have to go and type that information. And as we've touched on previously, it can be kind of confusing to figure out where that information is, because most organizations aren't utilizing it. So it is in the miscellaneous subtask, trying to figure out where that information needs to go. This really just makes it so much easier for everyone involved with the process.
So just to kind of recap here, so we've got the employee who knows the information the best, arguably. They're the ones actually being able to make the changes, or at least request the changes to be made. They're able to see it side by side, so they can kind of compare that data back and forth. Especially if somebody needs to see what changed and that kind of thing. So you're getting better data from the right person. You're getting it all in one place, and after all is said and done, I don't have to switch back and forth and copy paste into Costpoint or whatever. I can kind of perform that validation, and then and then the web services are going to then take all that information, just send it. Here you go, Costpoint, have at it. That seems to make a lot of sense, right? I mean, making it so that people don't have to key in so much is really a key part of what we do in all of the NeoFlows, and especially with this one. Really seems like it kind of empowers the employee themselves to to get those things changed that need to be changed as soon as possible. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, if the employee information is wrong in Costpoint, you may have some crossed wires when it comes to the really important stuff like getting paid and stuff like that. So
Yeah,
that tends to motivate people.
that does.
So I know you mentioned, I know we mentioned before, the employee, can kick off this process, but who else could kick off this process? What are some other ways that the process itself could be used?
So really, besides just an individual employee, it can be anyone. We really can structure it to different groups, departments, and things like that. And because of the safeguards that are built in with the approval, and you can have, you can set that as a person, or you can have it so the employee has to select somebody. It really makes it just, it really opens it up. It really, instead of having the cost, because cost point, you have to have the cost point administrator give access to certain people, and you're not going to give access to everybody. So this really kind of, it keeps that section of cost point secure to the individuals that you only want to have it, but opens it up so that anybody can actually update the information, or just view the information. Because as you said, if your information is wrong, somebody may want to go in there, check to make sure whichever they gave to HR when they were hired is still correct.
Yeah. So, I mean, thinking about it, I mean, so really we could kind of turn this process even on its head, right? So if maybe it's an organization that has highly centralized HR function and a powerful HR group, you could even have it to where HR enters the information, and then it could really go to the employee to then validate that information before it goes into Costpoint as well, right?
Yes, it
Yeah,
could.
that's really cool. So with with standardizing, right? So NeoFlow is all about, quicker time to implement these things in Integrify, get the processes up and running sooner as opposed to later, really get people associated with what the process is and all of that. So how long, how long does it take? I mean, timeline wise or whatever, how long does it normally take to get something like this up and running?
So should take less than a week. Things happen. So really the main things you have with this process is you're importing the process, you're configuring the web service, and then you're configuring, or the web service integration, and you're configuring the database integration. So that way you can send the information, but you can also pull the information at the beginning of the process. And then there's just one report. So it's a very simple process to pull in. You don't really have to do anything, besides getting those. And obviously, if you want different configurations, that's where we kind of say less than a week, just to give some room. So if you want it configured so only a certain group has it, or as you just said, you kind of want it reversed, things like that. But that's all pretty simple to do. It's all within Integrify. So assuming all the users are in Integrify, it's really a really simple process to implement.
That's awesome. So kind of a twofold question here. What first, what's the biggest pain point that you think this solves? And it may be repeating ourselves at some level. And also, is there anything else that we didn't necessarily cover that the audience should kind of know about this process?
I think the biggest pain point is just utilizing the cost point or the employee module, module. I really think that's it can be such a powerful tool for organizations, and really just making the process easier for everyone. It's just the ability to get so much more information. That's really the biggest pain point. Obviously, like, having the information simplified, it's great, having it easier to upload, but it's really driving usage of that module is really the biggest goal. And we really feel like once people use it more, they really find the benefits of that module.
Yeah. So I mean, the process, seems so simple, for just kind of getting employee data from the employee. We've heard so much lately about, employee onboarding, employee offboarding, and those types of things. And, it's one of those steps that can sometimes be missed, or, maybe somebody is with a company for, 5, 10, 15 years or more, and and the data gets stale, right? So you don't want the data to get stale. It's nice to be able to have a process that empowers the people to kind of change that information when necessary. So really, from a NeoFlow perspective, it does help to kind of bolster that employee module and make sure that your HR function is kind of moving forward with getting that data, make it a little bit more proactive. I encourage anybody who's on, if you have specific questions, now would be a great time. Go over into your Q&A section and get your question in there, because certainly we want to make sure that those are answered, and whether it's about NeoFlow in particular or employee management specifically, because really as we're covering each of these workflows, again, the goal here is to make sure that you're informed of what's happening and what's available to you, and what we can do in addition to what has already been done to kind of provide that baseline. So Taylor, any closing thoughts? Anything else that think the audience needs to kind of be aware of?
If you have any questions that come up later, I'd certainly reach out. The configuration of what we can do with this is, we can do a lot. So if there's a specific, need or issue with terms of you're looking to address, like, we can certainly customize the process, even though it is standardized. So nothing specific to add, but just, please reach out if you do have anything that, you feel that this could address your problem, but you're just not quite sure if it's exactly the solution you need.
That's a great point. The NeoFlows are standard. Integrify is extremely flexible, and we actually have a question come in. Our issues when we set up employees, there are other modules that we have to make sure that the employee is set up in. Yes, time and expense, user and cost point. They're set up in CER. How would it work with that? So really, and I'll let you weigh in too, Taylor. It sounds like that's really about an employee onboarding type of situation. As the employee's coming on board and making sure all of the different moving pieces, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. I mean, the process can be utilized as an onboarding in some ways.
Yeah, and I know that as we thinking about the different modules and things like that, that's one of the key differentiators between a workflow that would exist in Costpoint natively and an Integrify, a NeoFlow type of question or type of flow, is that the cool part with a NeoFlow and Integrify is that it does reach out to all the different modules. It can reach to multiple locations within Costpoint. So getting that data once and using it multiple times, especially as part of a bigger process, can also help to get those processes more streamlined. So I don't see any other questions, which is great. Again, like Taylor mentioned, if you do have any other questions, absolutely feel free to reach out to us. Grow ahead at neosystemscorp.com is going to be your easiest way to get in touch with us. Otherwise, absolutely inviting everybody to next week. We are going to talk about journal entry approval, which is a big topic, and how do I make sure that those things are how those are approved before they go to Costpoint, not as they're in Costpoint. So feel free to come back next week. We will see you next Tuesday, same time, same place. And I wish everybody a great and productive day.
Thanks, everyone.